Hi, I'm Dr. Tammy Nelson. Welcome to Integrative Sex and Couples Therapy. This is Module 2, Treating Low Sex and No Sex Marriage. And we're going to focus today on treating pleasure disorders. So this is, by definition, sexless marriage and the solutions for low sex and no sex and intermittently sexual marriages and committed partnerships. We're going to review what I call pleasure disorders and desire dysfunction in women and female bodies, and the performance issues that are defined as pathological for men or people in male bodies. We'll cover the causes of sexless marriage, and we're going to focus on 5 treatment areas. The low sex or intermittently sexual marriages or partnerships, the interventions and dialogues that I use for no sex couples, appreciations, stretches and repairs, soothing and dealing with triggers, the pleasure dystonic states and pleasure disorders in general. And we're going to identify 5 types of pleasure disorders and how these lead to what I call sexual discrepancies. So we're going to talk about pleasure avoidance, pleasure denial, pleasure resistance, pleasure aversion, and pleasure rejection. So I'm going to also show you videos of me working with a couple. You might know them from Module 1, Mike and Jen, and show you how they moved from their low sex relationship into a pleasure relationship out of some trauma and how they dealt with some triggers. And you'll leave here with some treatment interventions and understanding desire and arousal discrepancy a little bit better, and how to measure its impact on satisfaction in couples therapy. And we're going to talk a little bit about erotic recovery, what is sexual empathy, and how to implement and measure that in relationships that you might be working with. So I'm super excited to be here. For those of you who don't know me or haven't met me or are starting out of sequence in these modules, I am the author of The New Monogamy, which is redefining your relationship after infidelity, and Getting the Sex You Want, which is a way to increase passion and aliveness in a sexual relationship or in an erotic relationship. And my latest book, which is When You're the One Who Cheats, 10 Things You Need to Know, which is written for the person who's the outside partner or the cheating partner. And the latest book, Integrative Sex and Couples Therapy, which has chapters by many different authors, including myself, around different aspects of couples therapy and how to integrate them with sex therapy. And some of you may not know my first book, which was What's Eating You, which is a workbook to treat eating disorders and body image issues. So at the end of this course, there will be 6 modules that you will have completed, and you will be eligible for Level 1 certification for your integrative sex and couples therapy certificate. And you can contact me at isttraining.com at the Integrative Sex Therapy Institute, and I will provide you with all the details of how you can pursue that information. So contact me either through PESI at the information provided for you or through isttraining.com. ISTItraining.com. You can also find me on my Instagram page or at Twitter. Feel free to hit me up anytime, ask me any questions that you have, or make comments about this course. I want to just make a little disclosure and a request that throughout the whole course, through every module and every lecture, and throughout all your experience at Integrative Sex and Couples Therapy, I just want to let you know that language in this presentation has the potential to offend someone. Everyone has their own triggers, and some people are sensitive to words that have traditionally been used in describing sex or in sexual situations, or that are attributed sometimes in expressions of anger or offensive words that sometimes appear in videos or in slides to describe different things. And so please be aware that you should take care of yourself if you feel triggered. And if you feel offended, then certainly find a therapist, a good friend, a trusted religious person to talk to. The use or lack of pronouns or reference to orientation or lack of inclusion or intersectionality is unintentional and never intended to offend anyone who feels left out. My pronouns are she and her, and I totally respect any of yours. So that being said, let's move on to a review of how I describe marriage. And please know that when I refer to marriage, I'm also including long-term committed partnerships or anyone in a relationship, including those in open and polyamorous committed partnerships. And so, as I said in Module 1, I really believe there are two parts of a marriage or a committed relationship. There's the companionship, which is your roommate life, how you get along, your family, your home life. That's really the roommate, the hangout ability, as my husband would call it, part of your lives together. And then the whole other part of your relationship is eroticism. That's the passion, the connection, the in-love part. And that's really what we're talking about today. How do you help people heal that erotic aspect of your life and work on improving your companionship, but primarily heightening that in-love, passionate, and alive feeling? And another thing I talked about last time in Module 1 is that people really show up for one of two reasons in their relationship. Either the neglect of their erotic life, where there's been boredom or some kind of erotic shutdown, or a desire discrepancy like sexless marriage or sexless relationship. Or on the other side, there's been a trauma to their erotic lives. Infidelity, illness, job loss, some kind of expectation or an exit to their erotic life. And that kind of trauma creates relationship dysfunction to the erotic side of the relationship, not necessarily the companionship. And so therapists need to assess before they can treat, before they can integrate, before they can reunite the couple. And so in order to assess, which we talked about last time, you want to be able to ask the person or the couple, when was the last time you had sex and how was it? And then today we're going to talk more about how do you move out of the performance model where the judgment around good, bad, working, not working, normal, abnormal, creates shame and guilt and a lack of integrity in the relationship, and move more into a performance that is not about judgment or getting to a finish line, but around an interior experience of pleasure. But first, let's talk a little bit about what you bring as the therapist into the experience, into the session. So I'd like you to take out a piece of paper if you have something handy, or take out your laptop and answer these three questions. If you're listening to this in your car, you can do this in your head, but please, no driving and writing. Number one, what am I most afraid of that my couples will talk about in a session? Number two, what is one thing I'm afraid they'll bring up? Number three, what is one thing I'm afraid that I'm unequipped to deal with? So those three questions, what am I afraid my couples will talk about? What's one thing I'm afraid they'll bring up? And what's one thing I'm afraid that I'm unequipped to deal with? Those questions are countertransference questions. In other words, these three parts of the same issue are about things that define our edge of comfort. They define the lens through which we are seeing our psychotherapy clients, and they also help us identify the places where we should refer to someone else or get supervision. So I'll give you a few minutes to write down where you think you're feeling your edge. So now that you've done your exercise about what you're afraid your couples or your clients might talk about or bring up and what you might not be equipped to deal with, you might have noticed in your answers that these are things that are outside of your comfort zone, outside of the areas that you feel trained in or equipped emotionally or psychologically to deal with. Maybe they're things that bring up fears from your past or traumatic experiences, or maybe they're just outside of your values, the things that you hold dear in your life. I'll give you an example. I am not really equipped to deal with emotionally people who hurt children. I have children of my own, and I'm super sensitive around that. I cannot watch movies where kids get hurt or kidnapped or killed, or I can't go to horror movies where there's ghosts of children. It's always been an issue for me. I was afraid as a child. I had some incidents that were kind of creepy, and I just can't deal with that for my work. I'm not equipped to handle that range of emotion in an empathetic way, and not enough to be able to feel therapeutically effective. And so I have an edge around that. That's someplace I would refer out. Other people aren't comfortable dealing with people who have sex with animals, people who are very violent with women, people who are actively suicidally depressed. Everyone has an issue that they feel unequipped to deal with, or afraid people will talk about, or just super uncomfortable with, and that is incredibly important. The importance of that is knowing where right now it could change, and it may change by the end of this course, could change by the end of your career, that you feel your comfort level is and your edge of growth. You don't have to grow by pushing yourself past the point of pain and discomfort, but you should be able to push into areas that are new to you and intriguing and interesting, and have some sense for you of a mission or of a purpose in your life. But you certainly don't have to push into areas that are that you feel you're not going to be helpful in. So let's, particularly when it comes to sex, be super aware of what those issues are. There is a course called the Sexual Attitude Restructuring that if you're going to pursue sex therapy training to be a sex therapist, you're going to have to take 10 hours of a course that focuses just on this issue. Like, where are your edges and where do you need to refer out, and what are the things you need to know about people's sexual proclivities. And if you're going to talk about sex, you have to be comfortable with pretty much everything, but you don't have to treat pretty much everything. And that's the key here. So that being said, let's talk about how do you revision or envision long-term conscious repair of a sexual relationship. How do you treat a intermittently sexual relationship? How do you handle treating marriages or relationships that are low sex, no sex, or intermittently erotic? The way that I conceptualize this and help couples sort of look at this is that all relationships need 4 things. And I think of this as like a pie with 4 slices. You need sex, time, attention, and affection. And everyone's slices of pie are going to be different sizes. So I might need more attention and affection. My partner might need more time and sex. And if you're in an open relationship where you divide your time amongst several different partners, you can use this as a basis for conversation and communication, and even negotiation when you talk about negotiating your outside partners. So that you might have a problem with your partner having an outside partner, but only because they give more time to that partner than they give to you. You don't mind if they have sex or give affection or attention to that partner, but only if they give you enough time. So it's a way to visualize what your needs are. It's kind of like a language of love, but it's more like a need. and how you balance those things in your relationship can help you language, repair, and make conscious the things that are important to you. And this is important also as a therapist. You know, I think we touched on it in the first module, but I think it's important to dig a little deeper that when you come into a session, particularly with a couple, it's kind of a setup from the beginning that you are in a triangle. You know, you come in and there's a victim, a perpetrator, and a rescuer. And from the beginning, you're set up to be the rescuer, which is great. But by its nature, that triangulation is a recapitulation of a trauma. So a victim and a perpetrator and a rescuer is by its nature going to change around. So you can align with the bad guy or the person that is doing the other person wrong, but it's guaranteed within a few sessions that narrative, that dynamic is probably going to switch around as you learn more about the causal nature of the problem and who, for instance, is not having sex. Like the person who wants the least amount of sex actually has the most control in the relationship. They have the most control over the erotic nature of the relationship. So as the causal nature, the causes of why these things are happening in the relationship become more clear to you, then you might switch your alliance. So in other words, I have this couple, it's a lesbian couple, they've been together for about 14 years, and they came in because they weren't having sex. And the older woman said, she felt really unloved because her partner sort of rebuffed her every time she initiated and tried to have sex. And so initially, unconsciously, I would align with her and say, oh, yeah, that's terrible. Let's see what we can do and what's going on. And over time, the person who was the rebuffer, if you will, who didn't want to have sex, described her partner as saying, she would just come up to me and grab me. She would tweak me and pinch me and pull my hair, and I'm in the middle of, they have an adopted daughter, I'm in the middle of feeding the baby, or I'm in the middle of watching a movie, and she said, we have no conversation, there's no affection, there's no attention, we don't talk, we haven't gone out to dinner, she's never once said, give me the baby, let me put her to bed, I haven't taken a shower in a week. She's depressed and consciously frustrated with her partner, feels like they don't have a partnership. So now my rescuing sort of realigns with the other partner, with the younger woman who's the new mom, and that triangle now is shifted around. And so when I try to come to her rescue in a way and say, well, let's take a look at what's going on and what she needs, then they both get angry with me because now I'm asking them to change. So when people come into therapy, they don't really want to change. They want the situation to change. They want the circumstances to change. They don't want to change. So in many ways, things are working for them as far as the roles that they've taken on implicitly, they work for them. So as we begin to explore that, the younger woman who's staying home with the baby has an implicit assumption that as long as she shows how hard she's working and how difficult this is for her and what a martyr she is, then her older partner will continue to take financial responsibility and take care of her. But if she looks like she's having too much fun or it's too pleasurable, then she's afraid, unconsciously at first, until it became a conscious conversation, she's afraid that the older woman will resent her and somehow she'll be forced to go back to work, which she doesn't want to do. She wants to stay home with the baby. So as we begin to explore this trauma triangle, we have to shift that from a trauma triangle to what I call pleasure model, where there is less focus on me doing individual therapy with both of them and more focus on the two of them doing the work themselves and me witnessing that work. So I'm witnessing the two of them connecting with one another and I'm giving them feedback saying, wow, this really works for you guys. You're really doing this. Look how far you've come. And then I give them another piece of information. I explain what's happening, why they're doing what they're doing, how far they've grown as a couple, and I reflect back for them what I see, and then I give them more dialogue skills so that they can work to the next level. And this dynamic helps them reflect on what desire really is. So, sexual performance is a dysfunction where there's a desire, but they can't function sexually. So they want to, but they really can't. Sexual desire dysfunction means they can do it, but they don't really feel like it. So we try to intervene in a way that reflects, so assesses and reflects, assesses and reflects, and then treats by integrating the information and then reuniting the couple. So the treatment is to give them interventions to help them dialogue, which is a way to integrate the information into their actual lives. Because frankly, I can sit here and say all the most brilliant things I could think of in a session and lecture them all day, but if they don't do the dialogue and integrate it into their lives at home, then the minute they stand up and get into their bodies, they're going to forget all the work that they've done in the session. So without the integration, they can't sort of reunite as a couple with that new sense of self. So I have them do the same work that I had you do as a therapist in Module 1. Look at what does sex actually mean to me? How has sex made me who I am? And what does sex now mean to us as a couple? So just like you as a therapist think about what you've been taught about sex, the meaning of sex in your life, and how you bring it into the treatment room, and how your sexual background, how you've been raised as a sexual person, how your parental influences have changed you. I do the same for the couple. We talk about the meaning of sex, the narrative that they have taken into the relationship, and what sex has meant to them throughout their lifetime. And now, what does sex mean to us as a couple? And so I have them share that story with each other. So in this particular couple, the younger woman, I asked her to say out loud, what does sex mean to me? And then, how has sex made me who I am? And then what do I think sex means to us? And then the older woman said the same thing, and then we had a discussion. This is also useful as a journal exercise. So journaling, the Harvard Business Review said journaling is actually one of the best ways to integrate the progress you make in your business or in your work. So the impact that the studies that they've done in the Harvard Business Review, they talk about it, that journaling has to get you to the next level professionally. It's the same thing that happens in your brain when you journal about your successes in your relationship. So to encourage people to journal after a therapy session or after a couple session is really powerful, but also to journal together as a couple. What does sex mean to me? Write it down, and then have your partner write down, what does sex mean to me? How has sex made me who I am? Journal, and then have your partner journal, and then what does sex mean to us? And then have you both journal together. That experience is a great integration intervention. The reason that it affects both partners at the same time has to do with the neurological and sort of cognitive behavioral function that happens in the brain. I don't know if you can see this slide. It's sort of not sizing well. I can see it better in my slide. So the effects in your brain and in the hormone effects of of brain chemistry that happens in a session. First, many times you get triggered because you feel like you're in danger, like something terrible is going to happen. When your partner says, we need to talk, your cortisol levels go way up, you get really stressed and alert, but your pain sensitivity and your awareness of your body decreases. And then when your dopamine levels go up, when you feel connected in a dialogue, when you start to feel like your partner's being empathetic with you, when you start to feel soft gaze of your partner's eyes, your dopamine levels go up and you feel calmer and you feel more sensitized to affection and to attention. And those characteristics can last into the following week, sometimes up to 14 days. And those sensory experiences are incredibly important, particularly if we're talking about sexual dysfunctions and specific sexual dysfunction. In the couple that we saw last time, there was some question about whether or not the man, Mike, may have had some kind of sexual dysfunction. So in one of the clips I'm going to show you, there's a question about performance, and does he have an erectile dysfunction, and is it affecting his performance? We talked about premature ejaculation. 9 out of 10 men ejaculate within 1 minute after vaginal penetration at some point. 1 out of 5 men presents premature ejaculation irrespective of age. But there are 2 different types of premature ejaculation. There's primary premature ejaculation. That's the most common. So the problem has been present from the beginning, from when you started your sex life. And then in some cases, it starts in a secondary way, which something has happened and it creates a secondary form of premature ejaculation, which is not as common, because I think we talked about last time how we teach ourselves to ejaculate or to orgasm dependent on our behavior. So this is a learned behavior. And just like when men were asked how long they thought it took women to reach orgasm of direct clitoral stimulation, men said that they thought it should take no more than 4 minutes of direct clitoral stimulation in order for women to have an orgasm. And anatomically, it actually takes women an average of 8 to 20 minutes of direct clitoral stimulation to achieve orgasm, sometimes up to 30 or 40 minutes. So it's not so much that men are ignorant, it's that they just don't get the feedback that they need from that feedback loop from women. So it's reinforced when women fake orgasms. We talked last time that 80% of women face fake orgasms at some point in their sex life. So when we talk about this couple and whether or not some kind of sexual performance issue is affecting how much pleasure they're capable of having in their relationship, whether it's a fear of premature ejaculation, whether it's inadequate orgasmic performance or an inability to communicate what they're really able to do or want to do, whether they can't talk about what they like or have an inability to share fantasies or what they're really thinking of, or the fact that they've been doing the same thing for the past 15 years and it's now grown routine, it's not working the same way. Perhaps it's never worked, but they never talked about it. One of the things that we do know about this couple is that they have good vacation sex. And again, that is sort of a baseline that indicates that when they're not stressed and not tired, things go well. So we're going to focus on how do you switch people? What are the specifics? How do you assess for certain pleasure disorders and how do you treat them? What do you do if people have this narrow sexual repertoire, regardless if they're heterosexual or LGBTQ or IA, which is intersex or asexual? If they're limited to oral and then manual and then genital sex, or touching, then digital penetration, and then penis and vagina intercourse. Like, most people have a pattern. And how do you break them out of that repertoire if it's not working, or make that repertoire even more exciting, and let them have a dialogue so that they can express their appreciation for what is working, so that sex is about pleasure and not performance. So let's watch a clip of Jen and Mike talking about so far what has worked, and talking a little bit about pleasure avoidance. And you'll hear me explain a little bit about what that means in this clip. So this clip is about, it's a short one, it's about 10 minutes. Hi guys, how are you?
Good.
Good.
So it's been a couple weeks, and you've had 2 sex dates since we last met. So how'd it go?
Good.
Very good.
Good and very good. Okay, so you had the protocol, right? So the idea was to, one, set up a time to have a sex date once a week, same time every week. And then to just give each other a massage, take turns. You give her a massage and she gives you a massage. And no orgasm, no intercourse, but just experience the sort of receiving and the giving. And I know when we last met, there was some tension, a couple things. One, it wasn't going to be spontaneous, which maybe was interpreted a little bit as it wasn't going to be impulsive. Like, I didn't get to be impulsive whenever I wanted to. But there was also some question of maybe it was going to feel awkward because Jen was worried you didn't like to be told what to do and when to do it. So she was a little concerned. And then there was also some concern about, like, wait, who was going to buy the massage oil, and how are we going to arrange who was going to get what when. So there were some questions, but you guys seemed pretty optimistic. You were kind of looking forward to it. I know you were looking forward to just being sexual and sensual and intimate again. And you were both really looking forward to just connecting. So I'm curious about how it went.
It went very well, actually. We picked Friday nights at 8 p.m., which I felt was a good time, actually, because it was towards the end of the week, but it wasn't like Saturday and you let a day go by. And we were both looking forward to it. You know, I got the massage oils and...
Oh, you got them?
Yes.
So she was concerned.
I actually set up a special table.
Oh, a massage table.
Need good height, you know. I'm taller and I don't want to be bending over and
I know
be
you
able
have a
to
bad
concentrate.
back, so that was good. So you want to be able to concentrate, yeah?
And it's almost as pleasing to give the massage as to receive it. I mean, to see that, you know, she was enjoying it was satisfying.
Oh, good.
And I think, you know, we had some candles and we had some music. Talked very openly for a while, you know. And then all of a sudden, Jen's not saying anything. I keep going, but I could tell she was still awake. But
She got into it. She was relaxed.
Very relaxed.
Good, because that was one of your real needs, is to de-stress, relax, feel like you could just, like, not have to do anything. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, we have given each other massages before, but not with such intention like that. And it's funny because we said, I mean, I remember saying that, like, you feeling or saying that I thought he would be resistant because he, you know, because it was planned and all that. But I don't know. We both went into it, I think, like we made sure Josh, he had a sleepover, and Sarah, actually she went to the movies, and we knew, she has an 11 o'clock curfew on Fridays and Saturdays, even though she's 14, but she does, and she's chaperoned as well. So, I think given the fact that it was 8 o'clock, and we knew, well, she's going to be home at 11, and that there was still a time constraint to it, that we both were looking forward to it.
So you had anticipation.
There was anticipation, and we joked that, I was like, it's just me, like, you don't get anything this week, kind of thing. And I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel guilty, because I knew he's going to have it next week, and I didn't feel anything from him that he was, great, I'm giving this to you, and when am I going to get back?
So there's no resentment?
No.
So it took away the guilt and the resentment, which is something you guys talked about last time. Yeah, good.
And it was a really good massage, and yes, he did. He bought, he goes all out. He bought more than enough oils, and he got this massage table and the candles, and it was really lovely. And then we figured, well, we're going to use it again, and we'll continue to use it. So it's
good.
Yeah.
So. Well, I like the commitment. You went all in.
You have to have the oil. I mean, it's makes it easier to maintain the therapy over a period of time.
Yeah. So but the commitment is also the table, getting all the oil. Like, you really committed to the assignment, if you will.
And we basically, we met with you, and then I think we talked about it in the car home, and then about our date and, what day it would be. And then I think we settled on it the next day.
Good.
And just said, let's just make sure. And because I also, we talked about this, that even though it was just a massage, I didn't really want to have to explain it to Josh, and I didn't want to have to worry that he's going to come in and say he needs something, or starts laughing or making it into something that was
important
just for us. Yeah.
And so I noticed that there's no pillow in between you this week.
Sitting on it.
I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. So already you're sort of, closer. There's no boundary between you. You kind of needed that protection last time. And do you feel like a little bit closer in that way, or?
Sure, absolutely.
I think it also just the fact that we talked and we came here. I think we're pretty good at communicating things to each other, but it kind of just gave us freedom and a license to talk to each other in a way that maybe taking each other for granted.
Oh, good. Well, it's definitely, again, it's a commitment that you've made. You made the commitment to come here to work on things. You made the extra commitment to do your homework, to commit to those erotic dates. So now you're moving out of that companionship, and you're really focusing on the erotic part of your life.
And he's
Well, the whole idea of just getting a massage, that's full in is something to look forward to.
So you want to move to the full in massage.
Well, you want the
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
The point is you want to have sex. That's why you came. Right? Okay. So
But just the massage itself was...
That's good. It sounds like it went well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something else you said, I think, is really important, that it was just as good to give her a massage as it was to receive it, that it was really important for you to please her. And that is a big part of moving forward, that, men's number one need, actually, in bed is to please their partner. So as much as you want to have sex and you want to get off and all that stuff that you sort of put out there jokingly, there really is a huge impact here around making sure that you make her happy sexually. If you feel like, well, I think she's into it, but not really, it's not as satisfying for you, right? I'm not a man, so you can disagree with me, but it seems like pleasing her would be super important.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's primary.
Primary. Yeah, exactly. And you don't know if she's really pleased in bed or if you're doing everything she wants you to do unless she lets you know. So the only way you know is if she communicates that, right?
Absolutely.
And she's the expert on what works for her. And frankly, as a woman, what works for her one day, it might not work the next day. So just when you think you have the manual, it's different. And so she's the only one that can really let you know if you're, getting it right. You probably figured that out by now. Mm-hmm. But it's true, right?
Yes.
And she's shaking her head and rolling her eyes.
No, I mean, it's true. I mean, but what you're saying it's true. It's like, and I think for me, a lot of times it's because if I allow myself to go someplace else, like I can so easily take myself out of what's going on between the two of us.
Right.
And so actually when we had the massage, like he gave me the massage, we talked, like you said, we were talking, and I just felt so open, and like I wasn't thinking about anything other than like him and me, and I don't think I fell asleep. But I know that we stopped talking and he didn't talk, and it was just like,
you were
just
receiving.
felt so good. Yeah.
So we heard from Jen and Mike about their sex date and really how a 6-week erotic recovery plan can work and what it really means to switch from a performance model to a pleasure model. What does a pleasure disorder really mean? Let's dig into that a little bit. So let's talk about pleasure denial and see if you recognize what Jen is trying to discover about herself and how I'm talking to them about moving out of pleasure denial and into the full experience of appreciation and stretching into getting the sex that they want. So there are 4 levels of, 5 levels actually, of pleasure dystonic states. There is pleasure avoidance, pleasure denial, pleasure resistance, pleasure aversion, and pleasure rejection. We're going to go into each one in detail. But in healing those pleasure disorders, there are different stages of recovery. There is reviving desire, reframing desire into arousal, restoring the desire, and then recreating it into something totally new. And we'll talk about how to do those as well. So let's talk about pleasure denial. So pleasure denial is a way to make pleasure a thing that has a control mechanism in order to avoid shame and embarrassment and guilt, but more to avoid something that we have been taught in our culture is a lack of control equal to perhaps the force that can bring down the planet. I mean, we're not talking about, gee, I don't want this cookie because then I will feel in control of my body. We're talking about how self-control is connected for women since the beginning of Christianity to not eating the apple in the Garden of Eden. So pleasure and sin have been connected since the beginning of time. And interestingly, they've always been connected to women and sexuality. Eve was in the garden. Eve was naked. Eve wanted the apple. She longed for the apple. She wanted it. She shouldn't have it. She ate it. She couldn't control herself. And we all know what happened after that. So pleasure and longing has forever been connected with women and with sexuality and with being bad. And therefore aligned with being sinful and being ashamed. And with not having power over your own desires. And so pleasure denial is one level of the battle, the internal battle that goes on around desire. When you want something, let's say for instance a cookie, when you want the cookie, you really think that cookie would give you pleasure, but you deny yourself the cookie because you know it would make you feel strong. It gives you control over your desires and therefore makes you feel like you have overcome that baser urge for those lower desires which have led you to that feeling of shame. It's the initial Madonna whore dilemma that women have struggled with since Mary Magdalene and the Virgin Mary. That archetype of women has been around forever. And the downside of pleasure denial is that it leaves you feeling unsatisfied and discouraged and avoidant and exhausted. The upside is that you can feel in control of your lower self, your id, your hunger, your cravings. And also, as women, we've been taught not to be hungry for the things that we desire. So if we're hungry in our body, we should only be hungry for diet soda and salad. That we should always be in control of our urges and never out of control. Because a woman out of control can bring down a whole civilization. And that's why we should cover our bodies down to our ankles. And that men, if exposed to our sexual power, would not be able to control themselves. And so pleasure denial has been taught to us in many different ways, in many different lessons, and is a battle that women have been having since the beginning of time. So each pleasure disorder has some kind of manifestation that is used to maintain control. It's a control mechanism that's used to avoid something painful. So if I deny myself that which is pleasurable, it also gives me a way to control something. So one of the ways that you can work with people who you think want the pleasure of sex, want the pleasure in a relationship, but deny it because they feel that there's something shameful about it, or they feel that they'll be out of control, or if they let the genie out of the bottle, something terrible will happen. There's maybe guilt from their childhood or from their religious beliefs or something they've been taught about sex. One way to get to that is to ask those questions. What did your mother think about sex? What did your father feel about sex? What did your parents feel about their sex life? What were you taught about sexuality as a child? Did you have a religious belief about sex? What did your culture teach you about sex? What does it mean to be a woman and be sexual? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be gay and sexual? What about trans? What about bisexual? I worked with a couple recently where the father told the woman it was okay to be gay, it was okay to be straight, but being bisexual meant you were greedy. And so her girlfriend was welcome at family functions, but she had to decide if she was gay or straight. And so that's not an uncommon expression of this idea of you have to control yourself. You have to deny yourself. You have to be in charge of the things that you want. I have another couple that I see where he accuses his wife of wanting too much sex. That when she lets herself be herself and expresses her true desires, he calls her names, slut shames her, and accuses her of wanting too much sex. Therefore, she must be, and there follows a whole bunch of names after that. So it shuts her down, and then she wants to leave him, and then he feels guilty and shameful. And there's a lot of dilemma around what it means to be a woman and feel desire. The next type of pleasure disorder is pleasure resistance. Pleasure resistance is in response to relationship issues. It's usually symptomatic of something outside of us. It's intermittent, it's situational, and it's in response to something that's happening in the relationship with a partner. Usually it's used as something to trade, or something, what's the word I'm looking for? Something, I'll think of it in a minute. It's something that is used if you don't make up with me, if there's too much resentment in the relationship, if you don't do the dishes, if you spend too much money, if we're not emotionally connected, if we don't heal from this argument. The relationship control is at the base of pleasure resistance. So I have a gay male couple where he loves having sexual connection with his partner, but it's the only control or power he has in the relationship. If he feels like his partner is drifting away from him or is interested in other men, then he uses sex sort of transactionally to have power and control over their relationship. So he refuses sex or withholds sex or denies sex, even though it would be pleasurable for him, as the only way to balance out the power in the relationship, because he feels like his partner has all the power and he has none. So one way to work with that is to have them each share the narrative that they hold around the power and control in the relationship. The story I make up about sex with us is, what is the story that I hold around our frustration around sex? Who has the power and control? Who has the decision making in our sex life? Who makes the choices? Who decides when we have sex and what kind of sex, and who gets off and who doesn't? And who creates the sex date? Who shows up late? You heard Mike and Jen talk about that a little bit. Who does what to who on the sex date? Which is why in the 6 weeks of erotic recovery, it's a planned out, structured intervention where they take turns. 1 week, she gives him a massage and he falls asleep. The next week, he gives her a massage and she falls asleep. The next week, he gives her a massage and she's able to receive pleasure but no insertion and no orgasm. And then they switch. And then the following week they can have insertion and orgasm but no intercourse. And then the following week they switch. And so every week there's an increase in sensuality and connection and pleasure. And it's about learning to receive and give pleasure for the sake of receiving or giving, without the transactional nature of, well, if I do this for you, you have to do this for me. And for a lot of people, that's very difficult. It can be easy to give pleasure but not receive. It can be easy to get to receive pleasure but not give. Sometimes it's hard to do both. And in this type of resistance to pleasure, one of the ways of bridging that gap is to begin to talk about your own fantasy, what it is that you would like. We're going to hear in one of the clips with Mike and Jen how to have that dialogue about what it is that you truly desire, or what it is you have a fantasy about, and how to share that fantasy. And fantasy falls on a spectrum. There's the things that you're curious about, but you might not be totally turned on by, but they kind of give you pleasure to think about. And then there's the things that you truly have fantasies about that give you an erotic charge. Maybe they're in your masturbatory fantasy, or they're something that you've done in the past with your partner or someone else. And then there's the things that you take into action, the things that you actually really want to do. So you could just share a fantasy or stay in a fantasy that you never actually want to do or take into action. And those are important distinctions to make if you are going to move into an actual dialogue with your partner. This is the dialogue that I recommend for all couples, and that I recommend that Jen and Mike do, and I lead them through it, and you'll see how I do it. That you start off with appreciation, and you saw the appreciation. And you share and expand on what's already working so that you're not just starting with something you want to try, but you're building on what's already there. You're building on the foundation of what's already positive, and you're expanding into what you would like more of. And that's important when you're talking about pleasure resistance, because it takes the transactional nature out of the pleasure and becomes less of a performance and more of a reception. Pleasure aversion is when your body has control over the pleasure. So it feels pleasurable and you want the pleasure, and when your partner touches you or when something happens that feels pleasurable, your body has a reaction that is almost unconscious. And that may be interpreted by your partner as shaming, or you kind of have this repulsion to their touch, which is not on purpose, and it might not even be connected to what's currently happening in your marriage or partnership, but it's almost like you are trying to have ownership over what your body is experiencing. So you want to have the pleasure, but you also want to decide what and when your body will feel. And sometimes if you have pleasure aversion, you may be more comfortable giving and not receiving, or you be more comfortable receiving but not giving. And it's a way to, again, have control, that mechanism of control over the experience of your body and the experience of your pleasure. It could be a trauma response. It could be a response to trauma. It could also be an emotional trauma. It's a way to have control. So you're starting to see the connection here that trauma is many times the response to trauma is about control. It's rigidity. Okay, when there's a trauma, we get rigid, we get tight, and we try to control. Pleasure is the opposite of that. Pleasure is fluid and relaxed and receptive. And so as we connect to control, which is a way to manage trauma, we notice where the pleasure dystonic states are and imagine ways that we could appreciate, stretch, repair, receive to experience moments of pleasure. One way you can work through some of that pleasure aversion is to broaden the sort of intersectional experience of what's going on and look deeper or wider at why the body is responding that way. So what does society think about sex? What's our understanding of sexual pain? What does the medical community think of sexual pleasure? What are our judgments around desire? What's arousal? Like, to begin that conversation, what does society think about your body? Are you in a fat body that people have judged as unfeminine? Are you in a super feminine body that people have judged as non-masculine? Where do you feel like you deserve pleasure? Where is your judgment around how other people see you? And all of those conversations may lead back to the feelings around deserving of sexual pleasure, or the experience of sexual pain, or medical experiences that were traumatic or intrusive. There's a lot of judgment around pleasure when you find someone who's averse in their body. It's like your body has stored those experiences and remembers them and gets re-triggered, not just when there's pain, but when there's pleasure. And this is a way of controlling that. We find this sometimes when people get older, like when people age, and there's less of a race to the finish line, and sex becomes, for some people, aversive because they're still trying to have sex like they were when they were 19, and it's not working. And so they start to become averse to the pleasure feelings because they're afraid it's not going to lead them to where it used to lead them. And so We talk more about mature and secure sex, having deeper, more intense orgasms, more cuddling, more massage, less about orgasm and ejaculation and more about the sensual experience. Deeper, more erotic, energetic experiences, tantra, things that bring you to an expanded erotic experience instead of a faster, deeper, harder experience. And that sometimes can help with that pleasure aversive response. And then there is pleasure rejection. So pleasure rejection is when you have a more dramatic, angry, or blaming response. So you feel any kind of pleasure and immediately get reactive. It's a refusal, a blaming, and anger. It's when you try to control the narrative because something has happened to you and you decide, you know what, I'm going to decide this time how it begins, how it ends, what happens, what I say, who touches me, when, how, where. That is usually definitely indicative of trauma. So that narrative control is around rejecting all pleasure, and it can be seen in very rigid body postures, in super protective and depressed moods. It can be in fear of intimacy. It can be in self-sabotage in relationships. It can be in rejection of all commitment. It can be in out-of-control sexual behaviors that are no longer self-soothing, but really hurtful to the body and to the self. And so one of the ways you might discuss that or challenge that with someone who's a client or a partner is to create some kind of an erotic vision, like a future that creates and continues and encompasses some kind of care and meaning. In other words, if you cared about yourself, if there was meaning to your sex life, what would it look like? So what would it look like if you were to have a caring sexual relationship in your future, either with yourself or with someone else? Like what do you imagine? What can you fantasize about? Sometimes people who are truly pleasure rejecting can't even envision what that would look like. They can't imagine. I have one person who he had a really kind of a rejecting childhood. He was gay, but he didn't come out for a long time, and now he runs like triple marathons and beats the heck out of his body, and he can't imagine anyone wanting to be with him. Now he is jacked up on steroids most times, and his joints are starting to give way, and he's afraid that if he can't run marathons, he doesn't know what he's going to be able to do. He picks up guys on Grindr and has quick and what he calls meaningless sexual experiences, and then punishes himself for days in these really self-destructive, physically painful ways. He cuts himself. He does all kinds of things as ways of punishing and rejecting that pleasure. And so we're working on a way to create a future that has more care for himself and maybe some meaning as he works through some of that trauma. And actually, he does a little bit of sculpture. So we've been able to create a sculpture in his garden, and what that might begin to look like. He's created like a little house out of clay in his garden. And so we're talking about a future, a vision, erotic vision, something with care and meaning. So for some couples, being in this sexless or sex-free relationships, for some people that's okay. Being sexless is fine for both of them. Some people are asexual, and that's okay. But when it's not okay and becomes non-existent, that sexual neglect happens in the conversation first. It's the lack of communication that happens before it becomes truly a pathology. So in that first stage, when you're assessing for that cause and diagnosing those sexual function issues, you're looking for what is actually happening anatomically. What are the orgasmic function issues? What are the performance issues? What about pain or anxiety? What are the relationship issues? Is there any trauma? Are people communicating? Are they in couples therapy? So we've talked about all that. Now we're in this arousal phase where we're talking about how pleasure is manifesting in the actual relationship. And so are they just avoiding pleasure altogether? Are they denying it, like denying that cookie? Are they resisting it? Are they averse to it? Are they rejecting it? And I talked about some of those cases of what that's like. And in our next couple of modules, we're going to talk about how to restore desire, especially after betrayal and affairs and cheating and infidelity. And we'll talk about creating a vision of a new monogamy and writing new monogamy agreements. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that as well in these upcoming clips of couples. But, I wanted to talk about this interesting cultural phenomena first, that there's a study that's been conducted that said that sex among married partners has decreased significantly since 1991. So people are having less sex than ever before, even young people. In 2017, they published the study in the Archives of Sexual Behavior that said that American adults are having sex 9 fewer times per year in the early 2010s than they did in the 1990s. So it's not clear what is behind that decrease in sex, but there are a lot of ideas about it. Like some people say people are having children later in life, which makes them too tired for sex, which we talked about last time. Some people are saying people are just holding off and not having sex until after they get married, and they're getting married later than ever before. Some people are saying that young people today are masturbating and looking at porn, and that's filling that need for them. Some people are saying that sex is less of a need than ever before. And some people are saying that they're afraid of intimacy. They don't know how to do it. We have a lot of different ideas about it, but we're not quite sure. And I'm not even sure it's true that people are having less sex than ever before. Maybe they're having a different kind of sex. And maybe we have a different way of identifying what sex is. Maybe we aren't even sure what that means. What is sex today? So as we look at this next clip of Mike and Jen, I want you to think about how they define sex and how you define sex in your own relationship, in your own marriage, and how you might think about it in terms of other couples that you work with. So let's take a look at Mike and Jen. This is about a 9-minute clip as well, as they talk about pleasure disorders, performance, and pleasure avoidance. So one of the things I think is going on with you guys, and particularly this happens for women, is that what you were experiencing during the massage is you were able to totally be in the moment and receive pleasure. And I think for a lot of women right now, especially now with all the stress we have a whole set of what I call pleasure disorders. So I want to switch you guys from this performance model of I have to know that I'm pleasing her and I got to do it right, and if I don't do it in this certain way, then it's not going to work, and I don't know what to tell him because if he just loved me, he would know. I shouldn't have to tell him, he should read my mind. like I want to get out of that to just like a pleasure model. Like we should focus on what's going to feel good, and that should be the goal. But the hang up really for a lot of people is this pleasure resistance, really. Like pleasure denial, pleasure rejection, that's a big thing for women right now. And I think it has to do with control. So let me just give you an example of what I mean. You are a really busy person. You have your own business, you have the kids, you have your family, and it makes total sense that pleasure for you, your pleasure will go to the bottom of the list. Like, who has time for that, right? But it also, I think, is something maybe a little bit deeper, like pleasure denial. Sometimes you see this with people who say, like, I really want to eat that cookie, but if I don't eat it, even though it would give me pleasure, if I deny that pleasure, then I have control over myself. Those urges that might be like out of control, if I control that, I'm going to feel really good about myself, because then that pleasure denial makes me feel like a strong person. You know, in our society, the harder you work and the more you deny yourself pleasure, the more successful you are. So you should work all the time, and you should binge on pleasure like on vacation. And when you come back, you can be really hungover, and then get back to work. And the people that work all the time and are really miserable are usually the most successful, make the most money. And then when you make a ton of money, then you can maybe afford some pleasure. Right. And those 1% people, they have a lot of pleasure in helicopters and stuff.
Yeah.
But the rest of us, you know, we should work really hard and not have pleasure, because pleasure is a sin. And indulging in pleasure makes us feel guilty.
Right.
And sex has gotten put into that category, right? Because it can feel indulgent. Like, I got stuff to do. I got to clean the house. I got to take care of the kids. I got other stuff that feels more important. And also, pleasure avoidance is sometimes what happens in a relationship, where it would feel really good to have pleasure in our sex life. Like, maybe when he touches you, it feels really good, like in the massage, it felt really good, or between you, when you think about having sex, it feels really good. But if I avoid that, then it gives me some control in the relationship. Maybe that's the only control I have. Maybe that's the way I feel like I have some agency between us.
Is it because we're afraid of what might happen?
Maybe. Maybe what are you afraid of? Like things are going to get out of control, or what would be your fear?
It's good. I don't know. It was just this internal thought I had. I guess it has a lot to do with control.
What are
preconceived notions of who we are.
What are you afraid would happen between the two of you if things got out of control? He laughs.
It's nervous laughter, I guess. No, I wouldn't laugh about it, no.
But out of control how? Like,
I don't know, in bed.
oh.
Well, it wouldn't get out of control.
Why not?
Depends, that's subjective.
Swinging from I mean, his knee might act up, or I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like,
oh, I got a cramp.
Yeah, but
performance anxiety? I don't know where that came from.
You have a little performance anxiety?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, he's never had a problem with that, but I don't know how he's feeling about it internally in his head about, I have to perform for her, because he's never missed a performance kind of thing.
But he hasn't performed in a long time.
No.
And so there's some things that you don't know, like pleasure rejection sometimes. Like if somebody touches you and it kind of feels pleasurable, but your body responds and says, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't do this. Sometimes it's because your body's trying to control like the story. Like, I'll be in charge of this. This could go not so well. And sometimes men's sexuality is determined by three things. One, the capacity to get an erection upon demand. 2, the ability to keep your erection as long as you want it. And 3, the ability to ejaculate across the room. And which I think they get from porn because it's not very realistic.
I wondered.
You wondered about that? So if men think they can't do one or more of those things, they'll stop having sex. And they might blame the other person, or they might just start having sex late at night when the other person can't reciprocate, or they get nervous. And especially if it's a guy who thinks they should be the one who should be performing in a heterosexual relationship. So if any of those concerns come up for you, you might avoid things even if it does feel pleasurable, because you do have that performance anxiety. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Oh, completely.
Completely makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to have another dialogue. Remember, like we did last time? Did you guys practice that at all? Mirroring each other during the weeks?
No, we didn't, but not that specifically. But what we did do, I think I was more conscious of saying, like, honey, that made me feel really good that you made dinner tonight.
Oh, nice.
And you, don't you think I did?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think he too was a little bit more.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh yeah, this is good. Okay, what's on TV?
Well, no, I'm not. I don't think I'm always. I'm
No,
not like
I
that.
meant me too.
But no, yeah,
just in general.
We just were a little more aware of each other, and he knocked on my door throughout the week, 2 weeks. He would just check in. Hey, I'm just checking in. You need anything? And I was like. And I think there was that one time I was dismissive because I was on a call, and I just was like, I got it, and then, but I was very.
You make me sound more like you. Yeah.
So let's do a dialogue where I'm just going to have you share something you appreciate about each other, and then you're going to share something you appreciate about each other sexually, and then you're going to share something that you already do sexually that you want more of, because we're going to work on what's working and what's worked in the past, even if it was 15 years ago. You expand on something that's already working instead of saying in your when you're trying to improve your sex life, you don't say I hate it when you go to the left. You say I love it when you go to the right. So the idea is when people talk about their sex life, a lot of times they say this isn't working for me. We don't get it enough. It's not working the right way. I don't like it when you do this. And that never works, I can tell you. But I can tell you the secret to the universe is you always get more of what you appreciate. So we're going to start with something that's already working and expand on it. And then and only then, you're going to share something you want to try that maybe you've never done before. And then we end with an appreciation. Okay? So you're going to turn and face each other. So in Mike and Jen's case, where sex as an indulgence really gives us a hint about what pleasure disorder Jen is struggling with. That she grew up in an Italian family where desire and pleasure was really about sin. She was raised in that Catholicism. She was raised in that Catholic background where, women were good girls or bad girls, and the good girls got married, and the bad girls had fun, but they didn't have husbands or children. And so sex and pleasure have gotten confused, although, she likes to take baths and she likes to do things that are sensual, but she's confused about sex. And so I'm helping her with an increase in how to explore her sexual appreciation and how to explore her conversations around sex. So I'm going to show you another clip of them in a moment, but one of the ways that you can skip to a lot of the dialogue skills to implement the intervention to help people understand the impact on the relationship and to increase the satisfaction just in couples therapy immediately and sort of implement the empathy and how to measure that is just to integrate this 3-part appreciation. I appreciate blank because blank, and you helped me feel blank. Just this appreciation, small tidbit of a dialogue, if you give this as homework, as an intervention, it changes a lot of the way that the couple feel about therapy and feel about each other. And it will begin to shift their experience of empathy. So the goal is not so much forgiveness for things that have happened in the past, but empathy for each other's sexual experiences. Sexual empathy will lead to erotic recovery. Sexual empathy is something that we're going to talk about after this film, but it's finding empathy and validation of the other's fantasies, which are their real desires, which are underneath that are really their unmet needs. And so if you can validate that for the other person, if you can empathize with them, that gives them everything that they need. And that is truly a gift in a relationship. So you're teaching them how to empathize with each other, not necessarily agree. Agree means, yes, I like that too. Empathy means knowing you the way I know you, it makes sense that you like that or that you want that. Okay, so let me show you the next clip. This is the last clip in this module where they actually go through the rest of the dialogue, and you'll see it.
I appreciate when you kiss my ear with your tongue.
Okay.
So just mirror that part back.
So you appreciate when I kiss your ear with my tongue.
Yes.
Okay. And I go, but
Yeah, something you appreciate sexually.
yep, I appreciate when you grab my face in your hands and just tell me you love me and then kiss me.
You appreciate when I grab your face with my hands and tell you I love you and kiss you. Mm-hmm. It's romantic.
It's lovely. And something we do sexually that I would like more of.
Wow, well, there's so many finite things, and wow.
I know, it's like,
I know there's so many things that you would like more of.
Sexually, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, I think of many things, I guess. I think of positions.
And it doesn't mean you're going to get it, just so we're clear. But it's something that you're going to say, I would like more of this, and she's just going to mirror that back.
Okay. I like, wow, I mean, I feel like I'm on the spot. I'm like I'm picking something's better than the other, but that's not true.
No, you like everything that you do, but there's some things that stick out for you that you would like more of.
I like, it's hard to say.
It's embarrassing sometimes, but this is a
me.
good journey
right.
for you.
I'm
That's
sorry.
me.
I'm sorry, Jim. I like doggy style sex.
And you'd like more of that.
Yes, I like more of that.
so you like doggy style sex and you want more of that. Well, I knew that.
When you
And
put it that way.
that makes perfect sense.
And that makes perfect sense. Because I
Why?
know you like that. Because I
Oh.
know you like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've told me I look really sexy from that position.
And you have. You've told me, which I never never understood that, but I get it. And if that makes, and that's the other thing, if that makes you happy, then that makes me feel good and kind of like fulfills, satiates me.
And I imagine if we did that, it would make you feel...
And if we did that, I know that it would make you feel really good. It would make you feel really sexy. It would make you feel really turned on, loved, wanted, attractive,
I mean,
you know.
as long as you liked it.
Yeah.
Would it make you feel all those things?
Yes, it would, absolutely. It's
Good.
wonderful.
Is there something you do already that you would like more of?
That he does already.
Or that you do together that,
That
you
we
would like
do
more of?
together. Yeah, I love when we take a bath together. And we do have a great bathtub. And
It's deep.
it is. And we're both tall. And
Yeah.
Tell him.
it's just, we're both tall. And I love when we just take a bath together and we just are goofy and we do the bubble thing and we, you know,
Is that a sexual thing for you?
I mean, I would like to have more sex in the bathtub.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
There you go.
Just like in the pool. Like in the bathtub. Yes.
Good.
You appreciate and you like having our times together in the bathtub with bubbles. And you'd love to have more sex in the bathtub. Or like we do in the pool. And that makes me feel happy. That makes you happy. It makes me feel good.
And if we did that, I imagine you would feel what?
And if we did that, I would imagine that I would feel, or
Or you would feel?
I would imagine that you would feel satisfied, loved, and getting what you want because I care enough to meet your needs.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that a big part of
Which,
it?
yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, the reciprocity of it is, because I know that we've had times where I know that we're holding things back from each other or giving each other pleasure because of resentment or some kind of tit for tat thing or whatever. So it's like, it's so much easier.
Not feeling sexy because of just being tired or
Yeah.
letting other things encroach.
Yeah.
So that pleasure resistance thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just easier. I mean, in general, like putting out that energy, so to speak, like it's just so negative and it's draining. And then it kind of runs into the next day and the next day and the next day.
So this is easier.
This is much easier.
So the last part, or the second to last part, is one thing I want to try. So keep in mind that a fantasy is on a continuum. It's something you might be curious about, something you might have a fantasy about, something you want to take into action. Those are very different things. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's just something you might think about, something you might be curious about, or there's something you actually want to do, but that doesn't mean your partner's going to do it. So something you just might want to try.
Wow. Does this mean that you want me to go first, or you?
Yeah.
I can go first. I think of myself rather normal.
Normal's a setting on the washing machine. It means nothing.
That was good.
That's a good one.
I want to remember that. I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's all subjective. What, what the fantasy? Threesome?
So just mirror that back.
So your fantasy is to have a threesome.
Yes.
That's okay. So just switch.
Oy. Like that, like fantasy part's hard for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like yes, normal is not is a setting on the washing machine, but
Anything you'd like to try that you've never done before. Doesn't mean you have to do it. Just
Right.
anything.
Now I'm thinking of other things.
oh, great.
Sort of open the
I'm like,
open the doorway. Yeah.
a fantasy of like having sex on like in a movie theater, like even
Wow.
at our age, like literally having sex in a movie theater.
Okay. Just mirror that back. You don't have to promise to do it. Just mirror back.
You would love, you would like to, even at our age, you'd love to have sex in a movie theater. And
Good.
I could try to do that.
Good. So we heard from Mike and Jen and saw how the dialogue process really works. And one of the things that they were able to do is find some empathy and connection for each other. And empathy and validation of each other's fantasies, of their real desires, their unmet needs underneath, is at the core of the sex therapy for low sex interventions. It's not so much the defining moment, it is the thing that takes them into the future of their relationship and makes them feel that they can trust one another. Really, as we move into the future of their relationship and any therapy going forward, we're really looking at ways to integrate those split off parts of themselves, how to integrate dismembered parts, compartmentalized parts, feelings of shame. Therapy is really about remembering the split off parts of who they are, so that, as Shakespeare said, thus play I in one person many people and none contented. We all have that experience of being a different person with different people in different parts of our lives. But in your relationship with your primary partner, you want to feel that you can feel you're with someone you trust to expose different parts of who you are and not have to hide or feel ashamed or split off parts of you that are so compartmentalized and so hidden that you feel when you are with your partner less than yourself. The idea of psychotherapy is a shamanic journey to reintegrate the lost parts of the self, a gestalt journey to find those hidden parts of the self, the unaccepted parts, the shadow parts, the mirrored parts. And as we integrate those states into the interventions, into the marriage, and we see the impact on the relationship and measure the satisfaction in the couples, we see that people can talk about sex, people can talk about their fantasies, people can talk and integrate anything they need to. One of the ways that I have seen over the years that talking about fantasy really does work is in my books I talk about the root of fantasy being the expression of fears or anxiety. And this makes sense when we talk about sex therapy or sexual interventions in sexology, that the connection in the neurological pathways of your brain to fear, survival, trauma, can be overridden or healed by pleasure. And pleasure is connected in most of the experiential modes of and the experiential parts of the brain to high levels of dopamine and serotonin and the brain chemicals and the hormones that are released in the body when you orgasm, there's no greater behavioral or response that's connected to pleasure in the body than through orgasm. So when you experience an orgasm, when you experience that transformational moment and expand through a personal connection with a partner that you feel you can trust, when you are able to act out a fantasy that is connected to a desire or a longing that is also connected to orgasm, which is that brain chemical response and that floods the body with positive hormones and chemicals and feel good moment, that actually does influence those frozen or stuck parts that we talked about before that are like deer paths in the woods that have led to bad experiences or bad memories and can be overridden and healed through pleasurable experiences. So the insight and understanding that we have to be aware of our sexual fantasies, particularly as we share them with a partner, are more than just momentary distractions. They can be psychologically and neurologically healing moments. There's an experience in my book that I wrote about in Getting the Sex You Want of a woman who is afraid to be trapped. She's very claustrophobic, and yet her sexual fantasy is to be tied up and to be trapped. And she has panic attacks in an elevator when she gets trapped in an elevator and comes to me to be treated for her claustrophobia and also her fear of really being committed or trapped in a relationship. When we really consider in her couples therapy what her fantasies are, she's horrified to know that her fantasies really are the same as her fears. They're to be trapped, they're to be held down, they're to be caught. And she works out with her primary partner that her fantasy is to be tied up, is to be held down, is to be in that trusting moment where she can't get away. She has a safe word, they work it out, they talk about it for a long time, and she acts out her fantasy with him. When she comes back to tell me about it, she says it's the most rewarding sexual experience she's ever had. A lot of pleasurable moments and orgasm, and the two of them feel safer and more connected than they ever have. And several days later, she gets stuck in an elevator. She doesn't have an orgasm, but she does have a body memory that begins with the initial phases of a panic attack where she starts to lose her breath, where she starts to have a hyperpulsive reaction, and then her body, instead of going into full-blown panic, starts to calm itself. Now, this is similar, for those who work with trauma, to a body memory of traumatic body response, but it's the opposite. It's a pleasurable body response. So her body remembers that this deer path in the woods can end with pleasure. It doesn't have to end with panic. And she's able to calm herself down and not have a panic attack, probably for the first time in her life. And so that neurological pathway, that deer path in the woods in her brain, no longer ends in panic and deep anxiety, but can end in pleasure. And so we know that sexual fantasies can heal us from our anxieties, heal us from our fears. And when we integrate this conversation, as we did with Jen and Mike, and share those pleasure states with a trusting partner, then the integration of those two things is neurologically, psychologically, emotionally, and dare I say, energetically healing. Which is why, as you work through some of these modules and begin to have more of a language around working with couples, ask your patients about sex. Ask your patients about their fantasies. On average, 75% of all healthcare providers never ask about sexual health. 71% of patients are afraid to discuss anything sexual because they're afraid they're going to be ignored, afraid they're going to offend you. And 72% of patients will be comfortable talking to their clinician about sex problems, but they're afraid that their health provider won't respond. They would rather you bring up the question. They'll talk to you if you talk to them first. So these questions can help you assess if you think that your person or client is pleasure avoidant or is suffering from a pleasure disorder. Do you avoid taking vacations because you'd rather work? Do you feel guilty when you take a few minutes to relax? Do you find the need to be busy all the time trumps the desire to feel pleasure? Those are just some opening questions to ask if you feel like your client or couple is pleasure avoidant. Some suggestions you could make are take a long walk by yourself in the woods, find a place to get your hair done or get a massage or get a manicure, put cream on your own body, take a long shower, find something that feels good on your skin. Encourage people to do things that feel good and pleasurable for them. I have one woman who I encouraged to find something that would feel good in her body, and she said, "Oh, I do. I run 6 miles every day on the treadmill." And I was like, "Well, is that pleasurable?" She said, "No, I have to do it for my body." I'm like, "Well, that's not really what I meant." So find ways that you can encourage people to take care of themselves and find something pleasurable and soothing, and work up to it in different levels of increasing amounts of pleasure with or without their partner. In the next module, we're going to talk about counseling couples in different relationship varieties and review relationship theory techniques and dialogues and interventions. We're going to go over developmental states and interventions you can do in your office. If you have questions, you can contact me at Tammy@drtammynelson.com. If you have questions about your certification in sex and couples therapy, you can contact me at isttraining.com, ISTItraining.com. Thanks, everybody.